Welcome, travelers of time and myth, to Forgotten Scrolls. Have you ever felt born for something greater, as if your soul carried the weight of an unconquered empire? This story is for you, who grapple with purpose, who yearn to go beyond, who need to understand the boundless reach of human will. Tonight, we will take you on a gentle, captivating journey through the life of one of the most extraordinary men to have walked the earth. Prepare to close your eyes and uncover the secrets of Alexander, the Great, the young man who dared to dream of conquering the entire world. From his childhood in Macedon to his death shrouded in silence, Alexander was not merely a conqueror, he was a symbol of determination, strategy, and human contradictions. Loved and feared, hero and villain, all in one. We will explore his teachers, his battles, his loves, his wounds, and the indelible shadow he left behind. We will traverse deserts, cross mountains, and delve into distant lands as his empire expands before our very ears. And we will do so calmly, like one listening to the ancient wind of an eternal story told by a warm fire. Each chapter of this odyssey will reveal hidden pieces of his soul, decisions that reshaped the world, and moments that forged legends. We will tell you how he thought, why he acted as he did, and what set him apart from every other leader of his time. It matters not if you already know his name or if this is your first encounter. This rendition will be unlike any other. An immersive narration that blends history and reflection, perfect for sleeping, learning, and dreaming all at once. So settle in, breathe deeply, and allow yourself to be carried away. Because tonight Alexander the Great will walk with you in your thoughts. Dim the lights, quiet the outside world, and listen attentively to what is to come. This journey is not only about understanding a man, but about inspiring you to conquer your own battles. For perhaps within you, too, an Alexander, awaits awakening. Join us until the very end, where you will find not just knowledge but a spark of transformation. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Dreamed of Empires. In ancient Macedon, a boy named Alexander began to dream of something grander than his small kingdom. From a very early age, his eyes shone with the promise of adventures in distant lands that existed only in his thoughts. He grew up surrounded by tales of heroes and battles that fueled his boundless imagination. His world was a blank canvas, ready to be painted with deeds that time would never forget. The seed of an empire was beginning to germinate in his young, curious heart. Alexander was the son of King Philip II, a strong and ambitious man who unified Macedon and paved the way for the conquests his son would undertake. Though his father's figure was imposing, it also stirred in Alexander a constant mix of admiration and challenge. His mother, Olympias, recounted stories of gods and heroes, reinforcing the idea that his destiny was to be more than a mere prince. Thus, in the royal household, amid strength and mythology, a unique character was forged, prepared for greatness. From childhood, Alexander displayed a restless spirit and a keen intelligence that surprised his tutors. He was no ordinary child. He questioned, analyzed, and absorbed knowledge with eagerness. His games transformed into training sessions, and his dreams into plans. He was not content with merely learning to wield a sword or a bow. He also sought to understand strategy, politics, and the art of leadership. His gaze already reflected the determination of a man yearning to conquer the world. A legend tells that when Alexander was just 12 years old, he tamed an untamed horse named Bucephalus. This animal was considered impossible to control, but the young prince saw beyond the fear and discovered a connection no one else perceived. Bucephalus became his inseparable companion, a symbol of his bravery and ability to master the seemingly impossible. This episode marked the beginning of his fame and his special relationship with nature and power. Alexander's education was rigorous and diverse, imparted by some of the era's finest teachers. Among them, Aristotle stood out, teaching him philosophy, science, and ethics, shaping not only his intellect but also his worldview. These lessons were vital for Alexander to govern with justice and not solely with force. Philosophy helped him understand the world and his place in it. In addition to philosophy, Alexander received rigorous and constant military training. He was instructed in weapon handling, strategy, and combat leadership. Discipline and practice were essential parts of his daily routine. He learned to ride with skill, to use the spear, and to command troops on the battlefield. This physical and tactical preparation made him a formidable warrior, capable of facing any enemy. Knowledge of languages also formed part of his education. Alexander learned Classical Greek, the language of culture and politics in his time, but also showed interest in dialects of neighboring peoples. This ability facilitated communication with different cultures during his conquests. Understanding others and speaking their language allowed him to earn the respect of conquered peoples. Thus, language was another tool for his success. Literature and mythology were another fundamental pillar in Alexander's formation. His mother told him tales of heroes and gods that fueled his imagination and sense of greatness. He was particularly inspired by Achilles, seeing in him a role model. These stories taught him about honor, bravery, and destiny, concepts Alexander embraced with passion. The connection with mythology gave him an epic vision of his life. In the Macedonian court, Alexander also learned about politics and diplomacy. He attentively observed the negotiations and alliances his father made with other rulers. He understood that to maintain power, he needed more than military strength. He had to know how to negotiate and understand the motivations of his allies and enemies. These skills proved useful for unifying his empire and managing the diverse cultures under his dominion. Alexander's education also included knowledge of natural sciences and geography. Aristotle taught him to observe the world with curious and scientific eyes. This vision allowed him to value the importance of exploring and knowing new lands. His interest in nature and the environment influenced his way of governing with respect and admiration for the cultures he encountered on his path. This broad training prepared him to be a conqueror with vision. Despite the rigor of his education, Alexander also had moments of play and creativity. Music, poetry, and dance were part of his life, balancing body and mind. These activities helped him relax and connect with his human side. Alexander was not just a future king and warrior, he was also a young man with deep dreams and emotions. This human complexity made him even more special. The bond with his tutor, Aristotle, was very close and personal. More than a teacher, he was a mentor who accompanied him in his intellectual and emotional growth. Aristotle inspired him to question, to reflect, and to always seek truth. This relationship marked Alexander's development as a leader with critical thinking and firm values. The philosopher sowed in him the seed of ethical and responsible leadership. Discipline was an essential component in the young prince's education. Each day was structured with times for study, training, and rest. Alexander understood from a young age that consistency and effort were key to achieving his goals. This discipline also taught him to manage frustration and overcome obstacles with determination. His education was a total preparation for the life of challenges that awaited him. His family also influenced his education. His mother, Olympias, fostered the idea of a divine origin and an exceptional destiny. This gave him confidence and strength, but also great responsibility. Alexander grew up believing he had to fulfill a purpose beyond the ordinary. This yearning motivated him not to settle for the usual and to seek greatness in every step he took. His education was imbued with a profound sense of mission. Greek history and culture were studied in detail. Alexander learned about the great civilizations and the wars that shaped the ancient world. He knew the tactics of famous battles and the strategies of leaders like Leonidas and Themistocles. This knowledge gave him a solid foundation for his own campaigns. History became his guide and a warning not to repeat past mistakes. Furthermore, Alexander received lessons on morals and justice. Aristotle taught him the importance of governing with virtue and seeking the common good. These principles would form part of his understanding of power and leadership. Alexander wanted to be a king who inspired respect and loyalty, not just fear. Ethical education allowed him to distinguish between arbitrary power and legitimate leadership. The young man also prepared for public life and the responsibilities of governing. He participated in councils and made decisions under his father's supervision. These practical experiences helped him understand the complexity of government and develop leadership skills. Alexander learned that a good king must be close to his people and his soldiers. Education was not just theory, but also action and experience. Finally, the combination of these teachings formed a complete Alexander, prepared to face the challenges life would present him. His education was a balance between mind, body, and spirit. This gave him the tools to become one of history's greatest and most admired leaders. His life is testimony that education is the foundation upon which dreams and empires are built. Chapter 2. The Ascendancy of a Young King. When Philip II, Alexander's father, was assassinated in 336 BC, Alexander was barely 20 years old. Yet, he was already prepared to seize the throne of Macedon with firmness and determination. His youth was no obstacle to the nobles and the army accepting his leadership. Alexander displayed from the outset a blend of charisma and authority that inspired respect. His ascendancy was swift, but also fraught with challenges. One of his first acts as king was to secure internal stability within the kingdom. Alexander confronted conspiracies and rebellions from those who distrusted his youth. With speed and cunning, he managed to neutralize his political enemies without shedding unnecessary blood. This demonstrated his ability to govern with intelligence and a firm hand. The unity of Macedon was crucial for his future plans of conquest. Alexander also had to earn the loyalty of his generals and soldiers who had served his father. In a short time, he became a charismatic leader who inspired confidence. His courage on the battlefield and his close rapport with the troops solidified his authority. Furthermore, he kept alive the discipline and team spirit that his father had fostered. These relationships would be vital for his future campaigns. From the beginning, Alexander showed a great ambition that drove him to look beyond Macedon. His dream of conquering Asia and expanding his empire became evident to his court. He promised to continue his father's work and surpass his achievements. This vision allowed him to mobilize resources and support for his military campaign. Alexander was no longer just a Macedonian king, he was a leader with a historical mission. Soon after assuming the throne, Alexander launched a rapid campaign to subdue the rebellious cities of Greece. These cities saw him as a threat, but also a potential liberator from Persian domination. Alexander showed political and military flexibility, winning some through alliances and others by force. His ability to combine diplomacy and power allowed him to quickly control the Greek peninsula. This opened the door to his future conquests. In addition to his military focus, Alexander strengthened alliances with other important Greek city-states. He reaffirmed his role as leader of the League of Corinth, which unified the cities under his command. This consolidated his authority and prepared a common front for the invasion of the Persian Empire. Alexander understood that his power depended as much on force as on political consensus. Thus, he solidified his position as a king not only of Macedon, but of all Greece. During these initial years, Alexander also cultivated his public image. He participated in religious ceremonies and presented himself as close to the Hellenic gods and traditions. This reinforced his legitimacy as a ruler and his connection with the people. His figure began to acquire almost mythical overtones, blending the human with the divine. Alexander knew that a king must also be a symbol and an example to his people. His relationship with his advisors was another pillar of his ascendancy. He listened and learned, but also imposed his will when necessary. This combination of openness and authority allowed him to make sound decisions. Alexander was not an impulsive king, but a calculating one, aware of the responsibility of his actions. This political maturity distinguished him from other young rulers of his time. Personally, Alexander proved passionate and determined. He loved war, but he also appreciated culture and wisdom. This duality made him complex and fascinating. His strong character and ambition always pushed him to go further. However, he also knew how to surround himself with people who balanced his excesses. This combination was key to his reign, beginning with strength and stability. Alexander also had to face pressure from his own family. His mother, Olympias, remained a powerful influence, and at times tensions arose with other members of the lineage. These family dynamics were complicated, but Alexander managed to maintain control and respect. Loyalty to his family and his legacy was fundamental to his identity. The balance between power and affection marked his youth as king. Consolidated on the throne, Alexander began to plan his campaign against Persia. He prepared his army and gathered allies, aware that he would face an immense and powerful empire. His ambition was to conquer the unknown and mark history with his name. His self-confidence and trust in his troops were unshakable. Alexander felt ready to lead Macedon to eternal glory. In these years, Alexander also cultivated deep friendships, such as that with Hephaestion, his inseparable companion. This relationship was fundamental for his emotional stability and moral support. Together, they shared not only battles, but also ideas and dreams. The loyalty and affection in his inner circle were essential support. Alexander knew that no king could rule alone. He needed loyal allies. Alexander's youth and energy contrasted with the tradition and experience of his environment. However, he knew how to combine both to create innovative leadership. His gaze towards the future and his respect for the past were balanced. Thus, he earned the respect of old generals and young soldiers. This balance was key to his reign being successful from the beginning. Finally, his ascendancy was a demonstration that the combination of intelligence, ambition, and leadership can change the course of history. Alexander was not an ordinary king, but a young man who became a legend. His preparation and vision allowed him to lay the foundations of an unprecedented empire. The world was at his feet, and his journey had only just begun. Chapter 3. The Dawn of Conquest. Alexander's dream began to take shape with the plan to invade the vast Persian Empire. From Macedon, he assembled a formidable army composed of Macedonian veterans and Greek allies. The mobilization was swift and efficient, demonstrating the logistical capability he had inherited and perfected. Alexander knew he faced an extensive and powerful empire, but his confidence did not waver. The determination to change the world propelled him beyond fear. Before crossing into Asia, Alexander gathered his troops and spoke to them with words full of passion and hope. He promised them eternal glory and the opportunity to create an unprecedented empire. The army's morale soared, and the soldiers felt they were following a leader with vision and courage. Alexander was more than a king. He was a symbol of ambition and unity for his men. The campaign's initiation was charged with energy and expectations. The crossing of the Hellespont was one of the most symbolic and decisive moments of this stage. Traversing the strait marked Macedon's passage into a new world full of challenges. Alexander showed his audacity by personally leading the advance, making it clear he feared no danger. The uncertainty of what they would find on the other side did not deter the troops. That act was the first blow against the Persian Empire, a signal that nothing would be the same. The initial battles confirmed Alexander's tactical superiority. In Asia Minor, he defeated several Persian contingents with precise strategy and intelligent use of the terrain. The speed and coordination of his forces surprised the enemies. Alexander masterfully used the Macedonian phalanx, combining it with cavalry to break enemy lines. His army, though smaller in number, demonstrated unstoppable force and an invincible spirit. Alexander also showed cunning in negotiating with some city-states in Asia Minor, gaining them as allies or at least preventing their resistance. He understood that conquest is not won solely through war, but through diplomacy and political management. This combination allowed him to advance faster and with fewer losses. His ability to handle diverse situations was crucial in the first months of the campaign. Every step consolidated his control and reputation. One of the great challenges was maintaining the cohesion of a multicultural army far from their homeland. Alexander motivated his soldiers with speeches and rewards, and also looked after their well-being. He knew that fatigue and distance could erode morale. That's why he personally shared in the hardships and risks, earning the absolute loyalty of his troops. This close connection with his men was a pillar for his initial successes. The march into the interior of the Persian Empire also demonstrated Alexander's adaptability. He faced varied territories, changing climates, and enemies with different tactics. His flexibility and speed in modifying plans distinguished him from other generals. He didn't just use brute force, he also thought strategically to anticipate enemy movements. This made him a feared and respected leader. In each conquered city, Alexander respected local traditions and showed reverence for customs. This attitude earned him goodwill and facilitated the integration of new territories. He sought not only to subjugate, but also to unify under a common ideal. His vision was of an empire that embraced diversity, though under his authority. This approach was innovative and paved the way for his future governance. The successes in Asia Minor solidified Alexander's confidence and that of his army. The idea of conquering the entire Persian Empire ceased to be a distant dream and became a tangible goal. His ability to maintain a balance between audacity and prudence was key to overcoming every obstacle. The march continued towards the heart of the empire with a steady pace. Alexander was already recognized as the future master of the known world. As he advanced, Alexander received news of the reaction of King Darius III, the great Persian enemy. Darius tried to organize an army capable of stopping him, but Alexander always seemed one step ahead. Pressure mounted, and confrontations became more decisive. The fate of the Persian Empire was at stake, and the battle for world supremacy was approaching. Alexander showed no doubt or hesitation. Alexander's confidence was not arrogance, but self-assurance based on preparation and experience. He had trained and studied for this moment his entire life. His father's legacy and his own ambition combined to create an exceptional commander. Every victory gave him momentum and brought him closer to immortality. His gaze was fixed on the Persian capital, the ultimate objective of his odyssey. Furthermore, the campaign was also a process of self-affirmation for Alexander. Proving his worth against a vast empire and a hostile world was a personal test. The conquest symbolized his right to be the heir of great kings and heroes. Alexander sought not only power, but to leave an indelible mark on history. His youth and determination propelled him to defy the impossible. Throughout this period, Alexander perfected his leadership style and military strategy. He learned to combine the use of force with politics, speed with patience. This wisdom allowed him to keep his troops united and maintain the initiative. Every decision was calculated to advance without losing balance. Thus, he consolidated his path towards total conquest. Finally, the beginning of the conquest was a resounding success for Alexander and his men. Confidence, discipline, and audacity formed the basis of his victories. Macedon and its allies transformed from a small kingdom to the head of an expanding empire. This stage marked the beginning of a story that would forever change the geography and politics of the ancient world. Chapter 4. Facing the Persian Empire. Alexander prepared to confront the powerful Persian Empire, one of the greatest forces of his time. He knew this confrontation would define his destiny and that of his army. He gathered his best strategists and organized every detail with precision. His confidence in his abilities and in his soldiers' bravery was absolute. The upcoming battle would be decisive and fraught with risks. The enemy did not underestimate the threat and responded with a numerous and well-equipped army. Darius III gathered forces from across his empire, ready to halt the Macedonian advance. Alexander studied his adversary's movements and sought weaknesses to exploit. The rivalry between the two intensified with each passing day. It was a clash between two worlds and two styles of warfare. The first skirmishes demonstrated Alexander's tactical superiority. His formations were flexible and his cavalry swift and lethal. He exploited the terrain and surprise to destabilize the enemy. His troops' morale increased with each partial victory. He knew he had to maintain momentum to prevent Darius from regrouping. War was both physical and psychological. Alexander also showed humanity and respect towards conquered peoples. He tried to incorporate Persian and local soldiers into his army. This strengthened his cause and eroded Darius's loyalty to his own people. Alexander sought to unify under his command, not just to subjugate by force. His political vision was far ahead of his time and helped him consolidate his power. The main battle approached, and Alexander gathered his men to inspire them. His speeches were fervent, highlighting the honor, glory, and history they were writing. The Macedonian army responded with renewed commitment and an ardent desire for triumph. Alexander was not just a commander, but a symbol of hope and destiny. His leadership inspired absolute confidence. The battle that defined this stage was that of Issus, an intense and violent confrontation. The mountainous and narrow terrain limited troop movement, favoring Macedonian strategy. Alexander personally led the cavalry charge, seeking to attack the enemy center where Darius was located. The confrontation was brutal, but Alexander's organization and bravery triumphed. It was a decisive blow to the Persian Empire. Darius III fled the battlefield, leaving behind his army and family. This profoundly affected Persian morale and strengthened Alexander's legend as invincible. The victory at Issus marked a before and after in the campaign. Alexander showed clemency towards prisoners and treated the enemy king's family with respect. His reputation as a just conqueror grew with every action. After the victory, Alexander advanced towards the coastal cities of the eastern Mediterranean. Many opened their gates without resistance, acknowledging his authority. Alexander consolidated his dominion and secured strategic routes for future campaigns. His army, though exhausted, maintained enthusiasm and discipline. Control of the coastline was fundamental for supply and expansion. Alexander understood the importance of propaganda and public image. He presented himself as a liberator rather than a brutal conqueror. This strategy allowed him to win allies and reduce resistance. Conquered peoples saw in him a hope for change and improvement. Alexander knew that war is also won with ideas and symbols. The advance inland continued with minor but constant skirmishes. Alexander had to deal with guerrillas, betrayals, and the resistance of local rulers. His experience and adaptability helped him overcome these challenges without great losses. Territorial control expanded rapidly, and Macedonian influence grew. The campaign was gaining unstoppable momentum. Meanwhile, Alexander strengthened his ties with his closest officers and soldiers. His relationship with them was one of mutual respect and trust. He listened to advice, shared risks and rewards. This strengthened internal cohesion and prevented conflicts that could weaken the army. His leadership was a model of loyalty and discipline. The confrontation with the Persian Empire tested not only military strength, but also Alexander's mental resilience. The pressure, stress, and responsibility were enormous. However, his firm character and clear vision helped him stay focused. Every step forward was a reaffirmation of his destiny and purpose. Nothing stopped him. The conquest of the Persian Empire not only meant a territorial victory, but a cultural shift. Alexander promoted the blending of customs and traditions between Greeks and Persians. This fusion sought to create a new imperial identity. His political project went beyond mere military domination. Alexander wanted to unify a diverse world under a single government. The campaign also revealed the limitations and sacrifices of absolute power. Alexander faced betrayals, conspiracies, and internal tensions. Ambition and weariness began to show shadows in his leadership. However, the determination to achieve his goal overcame any difficulty. His figure was becoming more complex and human. Finally, the confrontation with the Persian Empire consolidated Alexander as a unique historical figure. His army, reduced but strong, advanced towards total conquest. The battle for world domination continued, and Alexander was ready to see it through to the end. His name would be etched in history as the Great Conqueror. Chapter 5. The Legend of Gaugamela. The Battle of Gaugamela, fought in 331 BC, was one of the most epic confrontations of antiquity. Alexander once again faced Darius III, who had assembled an immense army to halt his advance. The terrain chosen by the Persian was a vast plain, ideal for his numerous cavalry and war chariots. However, Alexander trusted in his strategy and the discipline of his troops. This battle would define the destiny of the Persian Empire. From dawn, both armies positioned themselves on the battlefield, showcasing the magnitude of the confrontation. Darius's forces greatly outnumbered the Macedonians, but Alexander's experience and motivation were decisive factors. The young king stood firm, confident in his soldiers' preparation and courage. His innovative tactics and leadership were crucial for the battle's unfolding. Alexander deployed his phalanxes in a tight formation, while the cavalry was positioned on the flanks for rapid maneuvers. The coordination between units was fundamental to counteract the enemy's numerical superiority. Darius attempted to use his cavalry to envelop the Macedonians, but Alexander anticipated this maneuver. His army responded with precision, halting the Persian advances and holding the line. At a crucial moment, Alexander led a direct charge against the center of the Persian army, seeking to personally attack Darius. The young king's bravery surprised everyone and motivated his men to redouble their efforts. The struggle was fierce, and the ground was stained with blood as both sides gave their all. This decisive offensive broke the Persian defense and sowed chaos among their ranks. Darius, seeing the battle was lost, tried to escape with his personal guard, leaving many soldiers behind. The Persian king's flight caused total demoralization in his army. Alexander did not immediately pursue Darius, preferring to secure victory and reorganize his troops. The battle ended with a decisive Macedonian victory, consolidating Alexander's power in Asia. After Gaugamela, Alexander was proclaimed King of Asia, a title reflecting his control over a vast territory. His fame spread rapidly throughout the known world, reaching even the most distant regions. Alexander demonstrated that with intelligence, courage, and leadership, any obstacle could be overcome. The legend of his victory was passed down from generation to generation, inspiring many. It was the beginning of an unprecedented empire. The battlefield of Gaugamela became a symbol of a new era. Alexander transformed warfare and politics with his vision of a unified world. Stories of his bravery and strategy became myths that transcended time. Greek and Roman historians extolled his figure as that of an invincible hero. But behind the glory, Alexander faced the weight of responsibility. The victory at Gaugamela not only signified the defeat of an enemy, but also the beginning of a great cultural transformation. Alexander promoted the blending of Greek and Eastern traditions, fostering the integration of different peoples. This process would be fundamental for the empire's stability and the spread of Hellenistic culture. His vision surpassed mere territorial conquest. He sought to build a lasting legacy. Subsequent campaigns confirmed the strategic importance of Gaugamela. Alexander advanced towards Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, consolidating his dominion. Each city he conquered received special treatment, aiming to win the loyalty of its inhabitants. His administration combined rigor and flexibility to maintain peace and order. Alexander understood that power is also wielded through diplomacy. However, the battle left physical and emotional wounds on many soldiers. Long marches and intense combats took a high human toll. Alexander worried about his men, seeking to motivate and reward them. His relationship with the army was close and based on mutual respect. This connection was vital to maintaining cohesion and effectiveness in the campaign. The confrontation also showcased the greatness of Alexander's military mind. His decisions on the field were swift and accurate, adapting to every situation. His ability to foresee enemy movements and react with cunning was key to victory. Alexander was not just a warrior, but a tactical genius. This combination made him unstoppable. Upon finishing the battle, Alexander paid homage to the fallen and visited the wounded. His humanity and respect towards his men strengthened morale. Furthermore, he established rituals and ceremonies that united the army under a single spirit. A sense of common mission was one of the pillars of his success. Alexander knew that the empire's strength depended on its people. The legend of Gaugamela was also fueled by chronicles and tales spread by travelers and poets. Stories of his bravery and skill circulated through cities and camps. These narratives helped build an almost divine image of the young conqueror. The mythologization of Alexander began at this crucial moment. His name became synonymous with greatness. Lastly, Gaugamela symbolizes the triumph of human determination over adversity. Alexander showed that will can overcome numerical force and tradition. His indomitable spirit inspired his contemporaries and future generations. The battle continues to be studied and admired in military history. Alexander the Great achieved immortality thanks to this feat. Chapter 6. Master of the Known World. After the victory at Gaugamela, Alexander the Great consolidated his position as master of the known world, expanding his domains as far as most could only dream. His empire encompassed vast lands from Greece to the borders of India, uniting diverse cultures under a single rule. The magnitude of his power was such that it inspired admiration and fear in equal measure. Alexander not only conquered territories, but also imposed a new political and cultural order. His ambition seemed boundless. The young king faced the challenge of governing an empire as vast as it was diverse, with peoples of distinct customs, languages, and religions. To maintain unity, he promoted cultural fusion between Greeks and Easterners, creating an environment of coexistence and respect. His vision was of an integrated world where cooperation surpassed rivalry. Alexander organized cities and established satrapies to better administer his vast empire. This innovative approach made all the difference. Alexander's dominion also involved rigorous control of his armies, which maintained order and defended the borders. His soldiers were loyal and disciplined, but the extent of the campaigns began to show signs of fatigue. Despite this, the king kept morale high, incentivizing his troops with rewards and honors. Alexander actively participated in every military and political decision, demonstrating close and decisive leadership. His charisma was fundamental to sustaining his empire. In his travels, Alexander encountered numerous cultures and peoples, from Mesopotamian civilizations to nomadic tribes. His intellectual curiosity led him to study their customs and traditions, enriching his own knowledge. This cultural openness allowed him to adapt and govern more effectively. He often participated in ceremonies and adopted elements of the conquered cultures, thus earning the respect and loyalty of his new subjects. Alexander sought to be a universal ruler. Despite his successes, Alexander faced internal tensions and conspiracies that threatened his stability. Some nobles and generals did not accept his methods or his vision of cultural fusion. These conflicts tested his ability to manage internal politics and prevent divisions. The king knew how to use both diplomacy and firmness to maintain cohesion. His government was not without challenges, but he managed to overcome them with intelligence and determination. The empire's stability depended on it. Alexander continued to found strategic cities that served as administrative and cultural centers. Among them, Alexandria in Egypt would become a symbol of his legacy and a beacon of knowledge for the Hellenistic world. These foundations helped control and colonize distant territories, facilitating trade and the dissemination of ideas. Alexander invested in a solid infrastructure that would allow the integration and prosperity of his domains. His vision transcended mere military conquest. Furthermore, his relationship with his generals and soldiers was close, though at times complex. The success of campaigns depended on the loyalty of these men, who followed him with fervor, but also with expectations. Alexander had to balance his authority with trust and mutual respect. His charisma and bravery in battle solidified his position, but he also faced moments of distrust. Managing his inner circle was key to sustaining the empire and its objectives. Alexander's governance involved creating an innovative administrative system for the time. He incorporated elements of Persian bureaucracy alongside Macedonian and Greek traditions. This allowed for an efficient and flexible administration, capable of adapting to different contexts. Satraps or regional governors had limited autonomy, but were under the king's strict supervision. This structure allowed for maintaining order without resorting to extreme oppression. Diplomacy and politics became as important as war. Despite almost absolute dominion, Alexander kept his ambition to continue conquering alive. His visionary mind pushed him towards new frontiers, while the empire needed stability and consolidation. This internal tension would mark the following years. Alexander had to choose between expansion and pacification, a dilemma that affected his leadership and his army. The balance between dreams and reality was a constant challenge for the young king. His legacy was at stake. The empire's cultural influence spread throughout the Mediterranean and Asia, generating unprecedented exchange. The Greek language became a common tongue, facilitating trade and communication. Art, philosophy, and science flourished under this new paradigm. Alexander fostered education and research, recognizing the importance of knowledge for power. This cultural aspect would be fundamental to his historical immortality. The raw blending of peoples and customs also generated conflicts and resistance in some regions. Not everyone accepted foreign domination or the imposition of new traditions. Some rebellions arose that Alexander fought with severity, but also with tact. His ability to handle these crises showed his capacity as a strategist and ruler. Maintaining such an empire required not only military force but political wisdom. Alexander knew how to navigate these complexities. The conqueror did not neglect his public image and his projection as an almost divine figure. Alexander cultivated a mystical aura that reinforced his authority and legitimacy. He presented himself as an heir of heroes and gods, which increased his prestige among his followers. This cult of his person was an integral part of his power. The personal mythology built around his figure served to consolidate his dominion and motivate his troops. Alexander transformed into an eternal symbol. His relationship with his subjects was also characterized by justice and equity within the limits of the time. Alexander sought to earn respect, not just through force, but through his integrity and sense of duty. He instituted laws and reforms that benefited diverse communities. His government aimed to be a model of coexistence and progress. Alexander not only conquered lands, but also hearts. Finally, his role as master of the known world was fleeting but decisive. The empire he created changed the course of history and laid the foundations for future civilizations. His political, cultural, and military legacy continues to be studied and admired. Alexander the Great is remembered not only for his conquests, but for his vision of a united world. He was, without a doubt, one of the most influential figures of antiquity. Chapter 7. Egypt and the founding of Alexandria. When Alexander the Great arrived in Egypt, he was welcomed as a liberator after the fall of Persian rule. The Egyptians, weary of their oppressors, saw in the young king a hope for stability and renewal. Alexander respected local traditions and religions, quickly gaining the trust of the people and priests. His arrival marked a new chapter in Egyptian history, full of promises and changes. Soon the construction of a city destined to be legendary would begin. The founding of Alexandria was one of Alexander's most significant acts in Egypt. He chose a strategic location on the Mediterranean coast that facilitated trade and cultural expansion. The city was designed to be a cosmopolitan center, welcoming Greeks, Egyptians, and merchants from various parts of the world. Alexandria became a symbol of the encounter between East and West. Its port and geographical position ensured its prosperity for centuries. Alexander personally oversaw the urban plans of Alexandria, ensuring it would be a modern and functional city. Wide avenues, temples, and public spaces were built to reflect the empire's grandeur. The blending of Greek and Egyptian architecture created a unique environment where distinct traditions merged. The city would not only be a commercial center, but also a cultural and scientific one. This was in line with the conqueror's integrative vision. The city soon attracted philosophers, scientists, and artists from across the ancient world, becoming a beacon of knowledge. The Library of Alexandria, which would be founded years later, was born from this cultural seed. Intellectual and scientific exchange allowed for Advancements in mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. Alexandria transformed into the capital of learning, rivaling any other city of the era. Alexander thus laid the foundations for an advanced and diverse civilization. Alexander maintained good relations with the Egyptian priests, who saw him as an almost divine figure. He was identified with the god Amun, which reinforced his authority and image among the local population. This association with divinity allowed for a smoother and more accepted governance. Alexander participated in religious ceremonies, showing respect and understanding towards Egyptian culture. His role was more than military. He was a spiritual leader for many. During his stay in Egypt, Alexander also strengthened the Macedonian presence in the region. He established military garrisons to secure control and protect trade routes. Peace and stability were priorities for him, as he needed a secure empire from which to continue his expansion. The administration combined local elements with Greek authority. This generated a mixed government model, efficient and respectful of customs. Trade in Alexandria grew rapidly due to its privileged location. Products from Africa, Asia, and Europe arrived, exchanged in its markets. The city became a crucial hub for caravans and merchant ships. This economic prosperity allowed for accelerated urban development and a rising quality of life. Alexandria became a prosperous and vibrant city. Alexander thought not only of the present, but of posterity. He founded several cities in his name, leaving an indelible mark on each territory. Alexandria would be the most important of all, a living testament to his ambition and vision. Future generations would remember this conqueror for his works and his lasting legacy. The city was planned to endure, a bridge between cultures and eras. Alexander's army rested in Egypt after the previous arduous campaigns. Their stay in this land allowed them to recover and prepare for new adventures. The cosmopolitan atmosphere and Egyptian hospitality helped keep troop morale high. Furthermore, Alexander took the opportunity to reorganize his army and establish new strategies. His ability to care for his men was one of the keys to his successes. Alexander also took an interest in Egyptian history and culture. He visited temples and monuments, fascinated by the antiquity and local art. This enriched his worldview and his role as a global leader. Contact with these ancient civilizations strengthened his desire to create a culturally integrated empire. Alexander's intellectual curiosity was one of his most notable traits. His ambition was not only military, but also cultural and scientific. In Alexandria, the learning of the Greek language among Egyptians was encouraged. This facilitated administration and cultural exchange between the various communities. Education became a fundamental pillar for the city's development and its influence in the region. Alexander understood that knowledge was power and that he should promote it to consolidate his empire. Alexandria would be a prestigious educational center. The construction of temples and monuments in Alexandria combined artistic styles from East and West. This reflected Alexander's intention to unite his empire through culture. The sculptures and buildings expressed the blending of traditions and the grandeur of the Hellenistic project. This hybrid art would be admired for centuries and considered a testament to innovation. Alexandria became a visual symbol of unification. Despite the prosperity, Alexander maintained vigilance to prevent uprisings or discontent. Egypt's stability was essential for his global strategy. His government was firm but just, seeking a balance between authority and respect. Satraps and officials acted under his strict supervision. The city grew safely and orderly, serving as a model for other regions. Finally, the founding of Alexandria represented Alexander's spirit, a bridge between worlds, a city destined for eternity. His vision of an empire united by culture and knowledge found its highest expression in this city. Alexander left an indelible mark in Egypt that would transcend his life. Alexandria would be a living legacy, a testament to his genius and ambition. His name and his story were etched forever in the sands of time. Chapter 8. Crossing into the Unknown. Alexander the Great, with his army strengthened and motivated, embarked on the journey to territories never before explored by the Greeks. The march towards Central Asia and the lands beyond became a true adventure filled with challenges. Soldiers faced extreme climates, relentless deserts, and inaccessible mountains. However, Alexander's determination kept hope and morale alive within his army. Every step into the unknown represented a step towards glory and immortality. The geography changed radically as they advanced into remote and little-known regions. Swelling rivers, deep valleys, and vast deserts presented natural obstacles that tested the troops' endurance. Alexander, an expert in strategy, adapted his plans to overcome each difficulty. The logistics of keeping the army supplied was a constant challenge. However, his leadership instilled confidence and iron discipline among his men. The encounter with new cultures surprised and fascinated both Alexander and his soldiers. Nomadic peoples, fortified cities, and unknown customs intertwined in this journey. Alexander showed genuine interest in learning from these civilizations and established pacts with some local leaders. The blend of respect and authority allowed him to avoid unnecessary conflicts. His vision was to create an integrated empire where different peoples coexisted under his command. As they crossed mountains and rivers, the terrain's resistance increased, and with it, the risks for the army. Diseases, fatigue, and uncertainty loomed daily. Alexander, aware of his men's fragility, boosted morale with passionate speeches and rewards for the bravest. His charisma and determination kept the group united in the face of adversity. The frontier of the known world expanded with every step taken by Alexander and his troops. The idea of conquering unexplored lands was a source of motivation for the young king. The desire to achieve eternal glory drove him to overcome any obstacle. This crusade into the unknown symbolized Alexander's limitless ambition. In his mind, the horizon stretched until it became an endless dream. Battles against warrior tribes and fortified cities marked the advance into Central Asia. Alexander's military strategy demonstrated his genius in every engagement. He leveraged mobility, surprise, and organization to win even in hostile territories. His soldiers, accustomed to victory, fully trusted his leadership. Every victory consolidated his dominion and enhanced his legend. The extreme climate made the march difficult, scorching heat during the day and intense cold at night. The lack of water and food made conditions even harsher for the troops. Alexander personally supervised resources, seeking to ensure his army's survival. Discipline and organization were vital to facing such natural challenges. Every day became a test of endurance and will. Interaction with local peoples offered new opportunities for alliances and knowledge. Alexander used his diplomacy to negotiate with tribal leaders and avoid prolonged conflicts. Furthermore, he took an interest in the customs, traditions, and political systems of these cultures. This approach facilitated the integration of new regions into his empire. His ambition was not limited to war, but also extended to building a united world. The advance into unknown territories also awakened fears and doubts in some soldiers. The uncertainty of the future and the distance from home affected troop morale. Alexander countered these insecurities with motivational speeches and demonstrations of confidence. His close presence and ability to share risks generated loyalty and courage. The group's strength resided in its leader and its common vision. Geographic exploration allowed for the discovery of trade routes and strategic cities. Alexander noted every detail to plan future campaigns and settlements. This knowledge expanded his empire's influence beyond known borders. His dream of a world empire drew closer step by step to reality. The legacy of these explorations would endure in history and maps. Campaigns through unknown lands were not only military, but also scientific and cultural. Alexander invited scholars and experts to accompany the army to study local flora, fauna, and geography. This combination of war and knowledge was a distinctive mark of his reign. Alexandria, founded earlier, would be the base for disseminating this knowledge. The Hellenistic world was enriched with every conquest and discovery. The physical and emotional exhaustion of the army was inevitable after long days of marching and fighting. Alexander, aware of this, allowed for rests and activities to maintain morale. Music, banquets, and ceremonies were part of military life to relieve tension. The camaraderie among soldiers and admiration for Alexander strengthened unity. The winning mindset was constant, despite the difficulties. Amidst the unknown, Alexander showed a human side, his doubts, fatigue, and moments of reflection. However, his indomitable will never wavered. The vision of an empire without borders and historical immortality gave him strength to continue. His leadership transcended the military and became an example for his followers. Alexander was a man with legendary dreams. The challenges he faced at this stage were decisive for his later conquest of India. Adapting to different terrains, managing a diverse army, and contacting new cultures were key learnings. Every difficulty overcome strengthened his position as a leader. The crusade into the unknown was the prelude to his greatest feat. The horizon no longer had limits for Alexander the Great. By crossing into unexplored lands, Alexander confirmed his place in history, not only as a conqueror, but as a visionary who dared to go beyond the known. His legacy is not limited to battles won, but to the union of different peoples and cultures. The expansion of the Hellenistic Empire changed the world forever. Alexander became an eternal symbol of ambition and conquest. Chapter 9. The Challenge of India. Alexander the Great's arrival in India marked a new chapter in his ambitious campaign. Facing a vast and unknown territory was a challenge that would test his strategy and endurance. Indian armies, commanded by powerful local leaders, offered firm and determined resistance. Alexander knew that to conquer these lands, he had to adapt to the new geographical and cultural conditions. India represented a frontier where the young king's legend would measure against his destiny. Battles in India were characterized by ferocity and complex terrain. Monsoons, swollen rivers, and dense jungles made conventional military maneuvers difficult. Alexander had to modify his tactics to face warriors accustomed to these conditions. The use of war elephants surprised his troops, who had never seen such force in combat. Every engagement demanded a blend of courage, ingenuity, and adaptation. One of the most significant encounters was the battle against King Porus on the Hydaspes River. Despite Porus's strength and bravery and his elephants, Alexander achieved victory thanks to a brilliant strategy and his soldiers' discipline. The battle was tough and costly, but it solidified the conqueror's reputation as an unstoppable leader. The admiration he showed for his adversary reflected the nobility and respect that characterized Alexander. This episode was etched as a symbol of honor in warfare. His relationship with Indian cultures sparked Alexander's interest in learning and respecting their customs. The influence of local traditions began to intertwine with Hellenistic culture, giving rise to an unprecedented cultural exchange. Alexander fostered alliances with Indian rulers and promoted strategic marriages to strengthen his dominion. This diplomatic approach helped stabilize conquered regions and integrate the population. His empire was enriched by cultural diversity. The physical and emotional challenges of the campaign in India deeply affected Alexander and his army. Accumulated fatigue, battle wounds, and nostalgia for their homeland weighed on the troops' spirits. Alexander, however, held firm in his spirit and his vision of a boundless empire. Personal and political motivations intertwined in his mind, fueling his desire for glory. India was the last great obstacle on his path to immortality. War elephants, with their imposing presence, changed the dynamic of combat in India. These jungle giants caused terror and destruction in the Macedonian ranks, forcing Alexander to seek rapid solutions. He adapted his formations and employed diversionary tactics to minimize the impact of these animals. The capacity for innovation was key to overcoming this new threat. War in India taught Alexander the importance of flexibility and creativity. Alexander was not just a conqueror, but also a cultural explorer. His interest in Indian philosophy, religion, and customs led him to incorporate Eastern elements into his court. This cultural blending laid the foundations for Hellenism, which would endure long after his death. India contributed knowledge and traditions that enriched the empire. History remembers Alexander as a bridge between West and East. The geographical conditions of India imposed an enormous logistical challenge for the Macedonian army. Rivers, jungles, and difficult roads slowed the advance and complicated the supply of provisions. Alexander had to organize secure routes and establish support points to maintain the army's cohesion. Collaboration with local populations was fundamental to securing resources. Efficient logistics was a decisive factor in the continuation of the campaign. The encounter with brave and skilled warriors showed Alexander that the conquest would be more difficult than expected. Indian tactics, different from European ones, forced constant military evolution. The combination of light cavalry, archers, and elephants presented a tactical challenge. Alexander valued his enemies' tenacity and learned from them to improve his strategies. The campaign in India was a school for military innovation. Tropical diseases began to affect the troops, weakening many soldiers. The humid and hot climate was an invisible enemy that caused casualties without a single arrow being fired. Alexander had to balance the need to advance with caring for his army. Morale fluctuated between hope and fear, and the king's leadership was crucial to maintaining cohesion. Health became a key factor in the campaign. The encounter with new religions and philosophies awakened a remarkable intellectual curiosity in Alexander. He studied the teachings of the Brahmins and became interested in the region's spiritual ideas. This open-mindedness was unusual for a conqueror and reflected his complex character. Alexander sought to understand the world he conquered, not just dominate it. His legacy included this mix of power and culture. The decisive battle in India ended with Alexander's victory, but also with a feeling of exhaustion and reflection. The desire to continue expanding clashed with the reality of a tired army far from home. Some soldiers began to ask to return, fearing the unknown. Alexander faced the difficult decision of halting his advance or continuing to risk everything. History chose a moment for pause. The decision to return was not easy for Alexander, who dreamed of conquering even more territories. However, reality imposed limits, and prudence prevailed. The return would also be an adventure full of challenges and dangers. Alexander understood that his legacy depended not only on territorial expansion, but on consolidating the empire. Wisdom now accompanied his ambition. The return through unknown territories became a test of endurance for the army. Geographical challenges, the hostility of some populations, and accumulated weariness threatened survival. Alexander applied all his experience to guide his troops and maintain high morale. The adventure transformed into an epic of survival and leadership. Every day of return carried the weight of a battle won. The passage through mountains and deserts on the way back showed the harshness of the natural world. The army suffered losses, but discipline and leadership allowed them to overcome adversity. Alexander presented himself as a close leader who shared the fate of his men. This gesture strengthened loyalty and respect towards him. The expedition, though difficult, consolidated the conqueror's legend. The challenge of India was the last great chapter of Alexander the Great's campaign. There he faced not only enemies but also physical, cultural, and human limits. His ambition, intelligence, and leadership were tested as never before. India marked the end of an era of conquest and the beginning of building a legacy. Alexander the Great withdrew with the glory of having crossed and conquered impossible lands. Chapter 10. The Wounds of Victory. After the arduous campaigns in India, Alexander the Great and his army returned with impressive victories, but not without deep scars. The physical and emotional wounds of his soldiers were visible, a reflection of the accumulated exhaustion from years of relentless battle. Beyond bodily harm, the spirit of many began to falter in the face of an uncertain future. Alexander, as a leader, understood that the glory of victory came at a high cost. The army's loyalty was tested at every step towards stability. The aftermath of the wounds affected not only the army but also Alexander himself. The young king, who seemed invincible, showed signs of weariness and concern. The constant pressure of maintaining dominion over such a vast empire rested on his shoulders. In his mind, questions about his legacy and future stability began to emerge. The inner struggle between ambition and reality intensified with each passing day. Alexander was aware that conquest was not the end, but the beginning of a greater challenge. The physical and psychological wounds impacted troop morale as they missed their homes and families. Loyalty was maintained out of respect for Alexander, but also out of fear of the unknown. Mental fatigue began to manifest in internal conflicts and rebellions. Discipline, key in previous victories, now required greater effort to maintain. The king sought ways to motivate his men, promising rewards and well-deserved rests. The magnitude of the conquered empire presented new administrative and social problems. Integrating different peoples and cultures into a single kingdom was no easy task. Alexander had to delegate responsibilities to local rulers and trust the loyalty of his allies. This generated tensions and conflicts that eroded his authority. Political stability became a battlefield as important as military wars. The young conqueror now faced invisible enemies. The wounds of victory also had repercussions on Alexander's own health. Battles, constant travel, and accumulated stress began to take their toll. Physical problems, perhaps exacerbated by intoxications or infections, affected his vitality. However, his iron will kept him standing, determined to push forward. Despite the suffering, Alexander displayed an image of unwavering strength. His figure became a symbol of power and sacrifice. Relations with his generals began to show fissures after years of relentless campaigns. Some questioned the king's decisions and the empire's direction. Fatigue and personal ambition created tensions that threatened the army's unity. Alexander had to balance respect and authority with diplomacy to avoid fractures. Leadership in times of peace proved as complex as in times of war. The future of the empire depended on his ability to manage these conflicts. The return from the campaign in India meant a reunion with familiar territories, but also with new challenges. Soldiers and officers faced the reality of an empire too vast to govern without difficulties. Adapting to peacetime life was not easy. After years of combat, Alexander launched reconstruction and development projects to consolidate his power. Internal stability became an urgent priority to prevent collapse. The loss of comrades and friends in the wars left emotional wounds difficult to heal. Alexander showed moments of deep sadness and reflection on the human cost of his conquests. Valor and camaraderie were etched in the army's memory. These sacrifices served as a reminder that glory came at a high price. The humanity behind the conqueror was revealed in these moments of vulnerability. The wounds of victory also included cultural divisions within the empire. The blending of Greek and Eastern traditions was not always harmonious. Alexander promoted mixed marriages and cultural fusion, but this generated resistance in some sectors. Hellenistic identity had to coexist with local diversity. This process of cultural integration would be one of the greatest legacies of his reign, though not without difficulties. Physical and mental exhaustion led to illnesses that began to affect the troops and Alexander himself. Constant exposure to hostile environments and lack of rest caused health to suffer. Medicine of the time was limited in treating these ailments. Alexander resorted to healers and doctors from different cultures to alleviate his condition. Human fragility became evident despite the aura of invincibility. The wounds of victory caused a change in the conqueror's perspective on war and power. The reality of human losses and exhaustion made him begin to contemplate other forms of governance. His interest in conquered cultures increased, seeking to consolidate his empire through diplomacy and knowledge. The experience gained in the Indian campaign influenced this new vision. Alexander was transforming from warrior to statesman. The need for rest and recovery led Alexander to plan a return to Macedon and Greece. The idea of returning to his roots generated both hope and uncertainty. The empire was consolidated but fragile without its leader. Alexander had to prepare his return carefully to avoid losing control. The tension between conquest and home became a personal and political dilemma. The wounds of victory taught Alexander that greatness is not only measured in battles won. Administration, cultural integration, and the empire's health were now his main challenges. The leader had to adapt to these new responsibilities with the same determination with which he faced his enemies. The path to immortality involved a balance between power and wisdom. Alexander was beginning to understand this complex reality. The army's spirit slowly recovered thanks to Alexander's leadership and the promise of rest. The unity of soldiers and officers, reinforced by shared experience, strengthened once again. Confidence in the king remained the pillar supporting the empire. Despite wounds and losses, the hope for a bright future propelled everyone. History would remember this moment as a test of endurance and strength. The wounds of victory were ultimately the price Alexander the Great paid for his ambition and glory. His figure was marked by the blend of power, sacrifice, and humanity. These experiences shaped the leader who would become a legend. History not only celebrates his conquest, but also his ability to face the consequences. Alexander the Great remained, despite everything, a symbol of greatness and complexity. Chapter 11. The Return Home. After years of relentless campaigns, Alexander the Great embarked on the journey back to his homeland. The return was not a simple trip, but a voyage laden with reflections on his legacy and Macedon's future. The vast empire he had built needed stability, and Alexander himself had to confront the changes that time had imposed. As he advanced, his thoughts were filled with memories and plans alike. The excitement of returning home mingled with the uncertainty of what he would find. The army accompanying the conqueror was exhausted but firm in its loyalty. Many soldiers longed to reunite with their families after years away from home. However, there were also concerns about how Alexander would be received and how his subjects would respond. The magnitude of his conquests had forever changed the perception of his reign. The return was not just physical, but also a reunion with a transformed and complex reality. Upon arriving in Macedon, Alexander found his kingdom in a different state than he had left it. Internal. Politics had shifted, and some nobles questioned his authority after such a long absence. The young king had to prove that he remained the undisputed leader, capable of guiding his people toward a prosperous future. Alliances and internal disputes demanded his immediate attention. Alexander applied all his cunning to manage these situations without losing control. The return also marked a reunion with his family and closest circle. His relationship with his mother and most loyal generals strengthened, but tensions and demands also arose. The absolute power he had wielded in war now had to be balanced with domestic political dynamics. Alexander showed a more human side, concerned for his people and for preserving unity. The Macedonian court became the stage for new power struggles. During this time, Alexander planned new strategies to consolidate his empire. Expansion had to continue, but now with a more diplomatic and less military approach. He wanted to strengthen ties between the different cultures under his command to ensure lasting peace. He focused on infrastructure projects and fostering cultural exchange. His vision broadened beyond conquest to encompass administration and governance. However, the conqueror also faced personal problems that affected his leadership. Wounds from the past, both physical and emotional, took their toll. His health began to slowly deteriorate, although he himself tried to ignore the signs from his body. Constant pressure and responsibilities weighed on his spirit and energy. Despite this, his determination remained intact. The return home also meant a time for introspection. Alexander reflected on the meaning of his life and his actions. He questioned the value of glory against the human cost of his campaigns. In his moments of solitude, the conqueror showed a more vulnerable and thoughtful side. These thoughts shaped his decisions in this final stage of his reign. The city of Pella, his birthplace, became a center of activity and planning for Alexander. There he gathered his advisors and strategists to design the political future of the empire. Discussions about succession and governance were constant and at times tense. Alexander sought to ensure that his work would not crumble after his absence. Political stability was crucial to maintaining the vast conquered territory. Ties with Greek cities were also a priority during the return. Alexander wished to strengthen Macedonian hegemony in the region and maintain Hellenic cultural influence. He promoted festivals, public works, and activities that would unite his people. These actions aimed to consolidate his image as a just and visionary leader. The return was not only an act of power, but also of reconciliation with his heritage. In the personal sphere, Alexander maintained complex relationships with his generals and close friends. Living together after years of battles and conquests brought with it rivalries and shifting alliances. Some questioned his decisions, while others showed him unwavering loyalty. The internal dynamics of his closest circle reflected the challenges facing the empire. Alexander had to carefully manage these relationships to avoid losing support. The young king also concerned himself with the education and well-being of his people. He promoted the construction of schools and cultural centers that would disseminate philosophy and knowledge. Alexander saw education as a key tool for development and unity. He wanted Macedon to be not only a powerful territory, but also an intellectual center. His legacy had to transcend the military and extend to the cultural and social. Despite efforts to consolidate his power, Alexander could not escape the rumors and conspiracies that arose around him. Political tensions and jealousy among his followers created a climate of distrust. The conqueror had to strengthen his vigilance and make difficult decisions to maintain stability. Intrigue was an inseparable part of the price of governing such an extensive empire. Alexander faced these challenges with the same determination as on the battlefield. The return home was also marked by symbolic acts and ceremonies that reinforced his authority. Alexander participated in religious and public festivals to show his commitment to his people and his gods. These manifestations strengthened his image as a divine leader and protector. The union between political and religious power was fundamental in his strategy. Thus, he sought to lay a solid foundation for his future reign. Alexander took advantage of this stage to establish new marital and political alliances that would ensure stability. His marriage to Roxana and alliances with other influential families were part of this strategy. These unions had a clear political and social objective. The consolidation of the empire also depended on these personal relationships. Alexander understood that power was sustained on multiple fronts. Finally, Alexander the Great's return home symbolized both an end and a new beginning. It closed a cycle of conquest that transformed the known world. At the same time, it opened the door to a new stage marked by administration and cultural integration. History would remember this phase as key to understanding his figure and legacy. Alexander was preparing to face what destiny held for him. Chapter 12. The Conqueror's Last Days. Alexander the Great's final days were marked by profound uncertainty. His health began to deteriorate rapidly, and the conqueror was forced to reduce his activities. The splendor that accompanied his life seemed to fade before his body's fragility. Friends and generals watched with concern the decline of the man who had dominated the world. The hope of recovery mingled with the fear of the inevitable. The atmosphere in the Macedonian court became tense and filled with rumors. News of Alexander's illness generated unease among his followers. Some conspired to secure their own future in the possible absence of their leader. Others remained loyal, hoping for a miracle that would prolong the great king's life. Political uncertainty intensified, reflecting the empire's vulnerability without its commander. During this period, Alexander showed alternating moments of lucidity and weakness. Despite his illness, he remained firm in his indomitable will and character. His thoughts revolved around the expansion and destiny of his conquests, but his body reminded him that he was not invincible. In his last days, the young king fought an internal battle that no army could win. Conversations with his closest confidants revealed a reflective man, aware of his legacy. Alexander discussed how to divide his empire, but he left no clear instructions. This lack of direction caused uncertainty and divisions among his generals. His death, announced as imminent, represented a challenge to the continuity of the vast dominion he had created. History was at a critical point. The Illness affected not only his body, but also his spirit. The conqueror, accustomed to constant victory, faced for the first time the defeat of death. Sadness and melancholy invaded his thoughts. However, his spirit remained strong and noble. This contrast marked his final days and left an indelible impression on those around him. As his health worsened, Alexander was moved to different locations to receive care. However, no medicine managed to halt the progression of the illness. The lack of a clear diagnosis fueled speculation about the cause of his ailment. Some believed in poisoning, while others attributed his condition to common illnesses of the time. The truth remained hidden behind a veil of mystery. In these delicate moments, Alexander requested the presence of his most loyal friends and advisors. He wished to bid farewell and share his thoughts with those who had been by his side through so many battles. The atmosphere was solemn and charged with emotion. The king showed his human side, full of affection and gratitude towards those who supported him. It was a farewell full of intensity and respect. The last orders he gave reflected his concern for the empire's unity. He wanted to prevent internal disputes from destroying what he had built with such effort. His desire was for his successors to work together for the common good. These words resonated as a moral legacy for his followers. Alexander understood that power must be wielded with wisdom and responsibility. The conqueror's fall had an immediate impact in Macedon and throughout his empire. The news spread rapidly, generating shock and sadness. Subjects mourned the loss of a leader who seemed invincible. Expressions of grief and tributes in his honor multiplied. Alexander the Great became an almost mythical figure from the very moment of his passing. Despite his death, his influence remained current in the thoughts of his generals and conquered peoples. Discussions about who should succeed him defined the political future. The division of the empire was inevitable, but no one could deny the mark Alexander left on history. His life and work were studied and admired for centuries afterwards. Alexander's name became synonymous with greatness and ambition. During the funeral, lavish ceremonies were held to honor his memory. His remains were placed in a tomb worthy of a king. The details of his tomb aroused the admiration and respect of his contemporaries. However, with the passage of time, the exact location of his resting place was lost to history. This contributed to increasing the mystery and legend surrounding his figure. Accounts of his last days mingled with myths and exaggerations. Official history was complemented by popular narratives that portrayed him as an almost divine hero. His figure became a source of inspiration for poets, historians, and rulers. Alexander the Great transcended as a symbol of power, bravery, and vision. His image was shaped by time and collective admiration. The absence of a clear heir generated conflicts that fragmented his empire. Internal struggles among his generals led to the creation of independent kingdoms. This division marked the end of the era of unification that Alexander had begun. However, his legacy remained intact in culture and history. The conqueror's spirit lived on in successive generations. Finally, Alexander the Great's last days represent a crucial moment in ancient history. The transition of power and reflection on his life show the complexity of the man behind the myth. His human destiny contrasts with the immortality he achieved in collective memory. This chapter closes a stage with the certainty that his impact was eternal. Alexander became a legend long before leaving this world. Chapter 13. The Immortal Legacy. Alexander the Great's legacy transcends his life and death, marking history forever, not only through his military conquests, but also through the cultural transformation he spearheaded. His vision of a world united under a single civilization blended diverse traditions. The fusion of Hellenic, Persian, Egyptian, and Indian cultures created a new historical landscape. Alexander laid the foundations for a legacy that would endure for centuries. After his passing, the conquered territories were divided among his generals, the Diadochi. Although they fragmented his empire, they kept Greek influence alive in each region. Dynasties were established that continued to disseminate Hellenistic culture. This era was characterized by advancements in art, philosophy, science, and architecture. Alexander the Great thus not only conquered lands, but also ideas and knowledge. The city model he promoted, with Alexandria as its highest exponent, became an epicenter of knowledge. This city in Egypt was a beacon of culture with its famous library and its lighthouse, one of the wonders of the ancient world. In Alexandria, texts were preserved, sciences were studied, and dialogue between cultures was fostered. Its founding symbolizes Alexander's commitment to progress and cultural unity. The Greek language became the lingua franca of vast areas, facilitating trade and communication. This linguistic diffusion was crucial for the integration of different peoples under a single cultural framework. Hellenistic cities were centers where languages and traditions coexisted. Thus, Alexander's legacy is measured not only in territories, but in the cultural bridges created. Hellenistic influence is also reflected in philosophy and thought. Schools like Stoicism and Epicureanism flourished in that context. The combination of Eastern and Western ideas opened new perspectives on life, power, and destiny. Alexander, unintentionally, was a catalyst for this intellectual encounter. His legacy permeated even the brightest minds of antiquity. Hellenistic art showed significant evolution, reflecting emotions and realism. Sculptures and paintings of the era captured human complexity in great detail. This artistic change influenced Roman art and later Western culture. Alexander is also a symbol of this aesthetic revolution. His impact went far beyond the battlefield. In politics, the Hellenistic monarchy model influenced future empires. The idea of a leader who unites vast territories and cultures was later adopted. However, the fragility of his empire showed the limits of this ideal. Succession and administration proved to be great challenges. Even so, Alexander set a precedent for later leaders. Alexander the Great is a figure who inspired great personalities throughout history. From Julius Caesar to Napoleon Bonaparte, many saw in him a role model. His ambition and bravery became synonymous with greatness and determination. His image was used as a symbol of power and conquest. The conqueror thus achieved symbolic immortality. The legends surrounding his life contributed to his eternal fame. Stories of his courage, intelligence, and character reinforced his myth. Many of these anecdotes were passed down from generation to generation. Alexander became not only a historical hero, but also a literary and cultural one. His figure inspired works, tales, and even philosophical theories. Alexander's legacy also has a spiritual and philosophical dimension. He was seen as a symbol of the pursuit of transcendence and destiny. His life reflects the human longing to achieve goals beyond the ordinary. Despite his youth, his actions left an indelible mark on the collective spirit. Alexander the Great represents in a way the struggle for eternity. Furthermore, his figure has been the subject of historical studies that attempt to separate myth and reality. Researchers analyze his life rigorously to understand its true dimension. This helps to understand not only his era, but also the formation of the ancient world. His legacy, thus, is also a legacy of knowledge and reflection. Alexander the Great continues to arouse fascination today. Archaeology has provided evidence that confirms aspects of his history. Excavations in cities founded by him reveal details of his material influence. This contributes to understanding the extent and impact of his conquests. Cultural blending is also reflected in the remains found. Alexander left a tangible world and an indelible mark. In popular culture, Alexander the Great remains a recurring character. He appears in films, books, games, and series that explore his life. His figure attracts due to the combination of heroism and tragedy. The story of a young man who conquered the world in a short time is a fascinating tale. His legacy also lives on in the collective imagination. Finally, Alexander the Great's immortal legacy is a testament to his extraordinary life. He not only dominated territories, but changed the course of history. His ambition, vision, and humanity made him a legend. Alexander is an eternal example of what determination can achieve. His influence endures, and will continue to inspire generations. Chapter 14. Curiosities of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great is one of the most fascinating historical figures, and his life is full of curiosities that reveal little-known details. For example, it is said that he never lost a battle during his military campaigns. This statistic is even more astonishing when considering the magnitude of his conquests and the adversities he faced. His military genius continues to be studied in academies worldwide. Another curiosity is that Alexander had great admiration for Homer, especially for the figure of Achilles. During his youth, he carried a copy of the Iliad with him and identified with the Greek hero. This literary connection influenced his vision of war and glory, shaping his ambitious and brave character. His education was fundamental in forging his legendary personality. It is said that Alexander broke the famous Gordian knot in Phrygia, a challenge that, according to legend, only he who would conquer Asia could solve. Instead of untying the knot, he cut it with his sword, demonstrating his bold and decisive style. This act symbolizes the way he approached problems with unexpected and direct solutions. It was a gesture that reinforced his reputation as an invincible leader. Alexander also stood out for his charisma and ability to win over his men. Despite his absolute power, he treated his soldiers with respect and shared their difficulties. This created a strong bond of loyalty and admiration, key to keeping such a diverse army united. His ability to inspire confidence was as important as his military talent. Curiously, Alexander had an impulsive and sometimes cruel temperament, which generated internal conflicts. Some historians suggest that he suffered episodes of rage that led him to extreme decisions. However, he also showed moments of generosity and respect towards his defeated enemies. This duality makes his figure complex and human. The king also fostered intermarriage between his troops and the conquered populations. He wanted to create a multicultural empire where different ethnicities would coexist and integrate. He promoted marriages between Macedonians and Persians, a policy uncommon for the time. This strategy sought to consolidate his dominion and prevent rebellions. Alexander founded about 20 cities that bore his name, although the most famous is Alexandria in Egypt. These cities were centers of culture, commerce, and political power. Their establishment reflected his vision of a connected world under his influence. The founding of cities was a vital part of his legacy. The young conqueror also showed interest in science and geography, accompanied by scientists and explorers. He documented new lands and cultures. His intellectual curiosity contributed to expanding knowledge of the ancient world. This interest went beyond warfare, revealing his multifaceted character. Despite his success, Alexander faced several conspiracies and betrayals within his inner circle. The constant threat to his life shows that his power also generated fear and envy. His ability to handle these situations was crucial to maintaining his authority. Danger was an inseparable part of his reign. One of the legends says that Alexander tried to achieve immortality by visiting the oracle of the god Amun in the Siwa oasis. He was proclaimed son of Zeus Amun, a claim that reinforced his divine image. This ceremony combined politics with religion to legitimize his power. Alexander used religious symbols to consolidate his status. His death at 32 remains a mystery with many theories. Some believe he was poisoned, others that he died of fever or exhaustion. What is certain is that his abrupt death left the ancient world without its most brilliant leader. The uncertainty adds a mythical aura to his figure. Alexander's body was embalmed and transported to Alexandria, where it became an object of veneration. His tomb became a pilgrimage site for admirers and followers. However, over time, its exact location was lost, increasing the mystery around his physical legacy. This contributes to the legendary aura surrounding him. Furthermore, Alexander had a horse named Bucephalus, known for his strength and loyalty. It is said that no one else could ride him except Alexander, which symbolized his power and dominion. Bucephalus was his inseparable companion in many battles, and his death was deeply felt by the king. This human bond enhanced the conqueror. Finally, the figure of Alexander the Great has inspired numerous works of art, literature, and cinema. His life and exploits are represented as the epitome of the epic hero. Throughout the centuries, he has remained a symbol of ambition, bravery, and greatness. His legacy continues to live on in popular and academic culture.